Welcome everyone to the final character examination of the Vision of Escaflowne Retrospective. Now this one has been a long time in the making. I'm glad for those of you who have stuck by me up until this point, and for this installment, we're going to be looking at the main character of the series, Hitomi Kanzaki. Now as a main character, Hitomi is a little unique, as while combat is a big feature in some episodes of Escaflowne, she doesn't actually take active part in it. In fact, she seems to hate violence, and is almost always a non-combatant. This does not negate her importance though, and the story manages to consistently center on her, as it is her story after all, and provides her with meaningful interactions and actions to take both in regards to other characters and to the plot in general. Overall, her character is a great exercise in writing a main character that is not the main combatant. While some may argue that Vaughn or Allen may be considered the main combatant of the series, it's clear that they're not the main character, and Hitomi always maintains her place at the center of the story as we watch it unfold from her perspective. While writing a story with a lot of physical conflict, starring a character which doesn't really fight is a challenge, just look at Kiara from Samurai 7 for example, Escaflowne does it very well here, as Hitomi is realistic and involved enough to maintain her presence without simply being turned into some overpowered and unrealistic super protagonist. In fact, as a whole, Hitomi's writing masterfully walks a very fine line between being realistic and likable, and capable and productive. While she doesn't really fight, she is still enduring and involved, contributing much to the story and its themes from both a logistical standpoint and from a thematic standpoint. She manages to draw the series together and provide a beating heart to it, which we will examine in a bit. Before we do though, we must ask, what does she do in this plot? As with previous videos, this plot summary is bullet pointed, and it's going to be as quick as possible in order to get to the main content of the episode, since Hitomi is the main character and that there's a lot that she does and is involved with. So if I skip a few things or if something's a little out of order, please forgive me. Now Hitomi Kanzaki is introduced in episode 1 as a girl who's very interested in the track captain Amano. In fact, she's so interested to him, she asks him to meet her after school in order to see if she can beat her personal best running time. If she does, she asks him to kiss her. However, in the middle of this run, she sees Vaughn, who is teleported from Gaia to the real world, along with a dragon he's fighting to establish himself as king. Now, Hitomi and her high school friends run away from this fight, as is logical, although she does end up running back to warn Vaughn of a fatal strike and ends up saving him so that he can kill the dragon. He lifts up the dragon's energist in a proclamation of victory, however, this takes Hitomi along with him back to Gaia. This first episode does a good job of establishing Hitomi as clairvoyant and brave, but not necessarily as overpowered or super combative. From here, she accompanies Vaughn to his coronation, and is unfortunately also present for the attack on Finalia, although she does manage to teleport herself and Vaughn out of Finalia when they are seemingly surrounded. After being rescued by Alan Shazar in the swamp, she then warns him and those in the castle of an impending Zybok attack. While this is ignored for a bit, it does prove to ring true, and Hitomi goes on to tag along with Allen and Vaughn on their way to the capital of Astoria's palace. This leads us into about the first third of the series, where Hitomi basically tags along with Vaughn and saves him on numerous occasions and teaches him numerous things via her precognitive powers. Her ability to predict the future and see visions of possible outcomes motivates her to often go out of her way to warn Vaughn and in turn avert disaster. She indirectly saves him many times, and in return, he directly saves her many times, often with the help of Escaflowne. This helps the two grow closer along the way, as they generally kind of just travel around the lands. It is during this time that she also meets Millerna for the first time, and establishes what is, in the beginning, a rather tense and catty relationship. Anyways, after a failed kidnapping, she is forced to flee the kingdom along with Vaughn, and they head to Freed, along the way sharing some personal details about each other and generally just growing closer. In Freed, she next teaches Vaughn about dowsing, and she, Vaughn, and the rest of the cast are suspected of being double agents. However, she does single-handedly manage to expose the Black-Towed doppelganger and basically mentally break him. In the process, I'd like to point out that she literally dies though, and we also get to see the fact that she's very empathetic, as even though she foresees the death of the faker, she goes out of her way to try and prevent it. This allows the group to establish their innocence and have some downtime between the next big battle. It is during this time that her pacifist desires start to be more espoused, as while Vaughn seems very enthusiastic for combat applications of dowsing, Hitomi is very hesitant and doesn't like being seen as a weapon or tool. After the failed battles of both the capital Godashim and the Fortuna Temple, Vaughn is then horribly wounded because Escaflowne is. This of course leads to resentment against the Dragon Slayers, and he goes on his quest to basically destroy them. This of course though sees the incident where he's dragged to the Shadow Realm. Hitomi, however, travels there with him and is able to break him out of his stupor. She then goes along with the group to Atlantis and ends up saving both Allen and Vaughn from various sort of mental journeys. While she does this, she also manages to exposition dump by reading this stone tablet here, giving a lot of lore relevant to the world of Gaia. There's also this scene where she talks to her Vaughn's mother, I believe, about the negative use of her fortune-telling abilities. Something we'll touch on later. This scene is very awkward and it does deserve some conversation. Anyways, after the Atlantis trip, they are then teleported to Zybok briefly, where she helps Vaughn escape, along with Allen, after calling out Dornkirk's twisted message and desires. With everyone regrouped in Palace, she then goes to Millerna to discourage her arranged marriage, although she does give in to Millerna's request for a reading, and then into the temptation of kind of trying to fudge the numbers in order to persuade Millerna that Dryden is the best choice, so that Allen is still available. She, however, instantly regrets this and feels quite bad about it, although she is rather quickly forgiven once the wedding is crashed. With this wedding in place though, Millerna is now taken and Allen kind of goes through his sad phase, and simultaneously, Dornkirk and Falcon conspire to set Hitomi up with someone else in order to get her away from Vaughn. This sees the weird fate manipulation scene where she's basically shipped with Allen. We've covered this in the Allen episode and why it's weird. Although I do want to point out that Hitomi also says that it's weird in the series, and does actively say, hey, I don't think this is a good idea. She then gets kidnapped, although basically convinces her kidnapper to let her go, and this is a good scene as it establishes her empathy. She then next teams up with Vaughn to go meet with Falcon, simply because she wants to see the brothers reconcile, although this does arouse suspicion from Allen. After talking to Falcon though, and generally just hanging around the kingdom while the war preparations are being done, she witnesses a big fight that Vaughn partakes in via their psychic bond. This distresses her greatly, as Vaughn does seem to enjoy some of it, and as a result, she kind of just teleports herself home. Although this doesn't last long, as her desire to be with Vaughn finally makes its way to its surface, and she and Vaughn recreate the acts of the first episode in order to reunite. Reunited, she then goes to Falcon and along with him teleports to Dornkirk in order to stop the final battle. Falcon kills Dornkirk of course during this exchange, but unfortunately dies, and a distressed Hitomi may or may not activate the fate machine. It seems to activate when she's distressed, although it's not clear if that's because it's of happenstance or if it's one caused the other. She collects herself and calls upon Vaughn mentally, telling him that the fighting is not necessary and that she realizes how she feels about him. Their bond cemented, Vaughn then realizes that conflict is not what this life is all about, and flies to her as the two embrace, and the sight of him flying away ends up calming the combatants and basically ending the war. The final scene sees her talk to Vaughn one last time, as the two establish that they will never forget each other, although Hitomi does have to go home. Hitomi returns home, and after having mentioned that she no longer believes in fortune-telling, looks out over the sea to see Vaughn still lovingly watching over her. With Hitomi's place in the plot explored, we can now look at what she contributes to the production as a whole, and that contribution is a heart. Hitomi serves as the beating heart of the group, helping others get by, and providing certain practical skills when applicable. Now, as you might have noticed, I didn't necessarily go over a lot of relationship details in the plot summary portion of this video, mostly because I found it easier to simply summarize them in a compact little section, as opposed to go over every detail in chronological order, as that might get a little messy, seeing as that Hitomi is the main character, and a lot of things happen not necessarily at the same time. We'll start with her relationship with Millerna. Now, Hitomi's relationship with Millerna does start off on a bad foot, as Millerna kind of picks on her a little, and Hitomi is kind of annoyed with this arrogance that Millerna seems to bring to the table. However, as the two venture around more, they soon start to come to an understanding, and they soon find out that, in reality, they're both young women trying to find themselves, and even though they may see each other as competition from time to time, that doesn't mean that they shouldn't be friends and that they can't respect each other. By the end of the series, in fact, Millerna seems to look up to Hitomi actually, and I really love this moment here where they kind of have a bonding moment after the mutual discovery of Allen's shady pasts. I feel like it really cements their bond, especially after Millerna forgives Hitomi for quote-unquote sabotaging the wedding. On the topic of Allen, Hitomi's relationship with him is a little weird. Now, we went into this in a lot more detail on the Allen video, where we basically explained that his insecurities prevent him from forming healthy relationships, And it is kind of weird considering that there is a 6-year age gap between the two, one of them being over 18 and the other one not. In general, from the beginning of the plot, Hitomi kind of sees Allen as the knight in shining armor and is attracted to him for that reason, although going along with the deconstruction of fantasy tropes present in the series, this is proven throughout the series to be kind of a red herring, and that Allen is not actually the right person for Hitomi, and she simply needs to overcome her naive fantasies, like we the viewers must, in order to really find out who she should be with, i.e. Vaughn. Now this relationship is the corner piece of the series, and it is the accumulation of a series of interactions that the two have from the very first episode. While Vaughn is initially gruff and Hitomi initially fails to see past his aloof exterior, over time as the two venture across Gaia and share more personal thoughts and past experiences with each other, they soon come to value each other's company. Vaughn of course values Hitomi for the practical skills she provides, although he really does care about her not only as a friend but also as a lover. He feels obligated to get her home, and although he does value genuinely being with her, and he does genuinely love her, seeing how supportive and open she is, how emotionally expressive she is, something which is very valuable to a man like him who is very closed off. Hitomi, on the other hand, doesn't necessarily see Vaughn's feelings at first, although she does come to appreciate them once he starts to present them more openly, and once it's obvious that Allen is not necessarily the perfect knight that he appears to be. In fact, throughout the story, Vaughn's ability to express himself increases directly thanks to Hitomi's help and interactions with him, and as a result, they grow closer and closer because he is more able to express himself with Hitomi's help. This all accumulates, of course, with their grand reunion in episode 24 and their final proclamation of being together, at least mentally, forever, in the final episode. Now, while all of these relationships are unique, there is a few similarities that they all have that I do want to point out real quick. And that is that Hitomi helps all of these people a great deal in her own way. In Millerna's case, Hitomi teaches her how to be warmer and more humble and down to earth. In Allen's case, Hitomi's refusal of him after a few episodes teaches him that he can make it on his own, and that maybe he should take some time to review himself before trying to get into a relationship, that he probably should actually find himself before trying to find someone else. And of course with Vaughn, she helps him become more emotionally expressive and more open, finally accumulating with him being able to directly tell her how she feels and to feel young love. Hitomi's great ability to empathize with others is her greatest power at the end of the day, as it helps people not only relate to her, but also express themselves more clearly and grow more in touch with who they are as an individual. While she doesn't fight that much, that's fine, because the Vision of Escaflowne isn't about the cool mech fights. It's about exploring one's heart and learning to listen to it, and that's exactly what Hitomi does. Through her journey, we see the journey of a young person learning to explore who they are and how they feel about things, how to express themselves, and how they want to express themselves and carry on around others. We learn that sometimes the heart may not always know what it wants, but if we cautiously follow it, we can get a vague idea and use that to guide ourselves towards greater goals. As we guide ourselves, we start to learn more about ourselves and how to use our own agency to make our own fate. Of course, there will be setbacks, and what we may want may not be originally what we imagined it to be, but there will be progress as long as we remain resolute. Hitomi's character arc explains why she's so important to the series. She's important because she is the character that establishes the power that we all have over our own destiny, and that we can exercise this power while being a good person. Now initially, the power that Hitomi seems to have is set up to be fortune-telling and dowsing and her precognitive abilities, her clairvoyant skills. However, Escaflowne does go out of its way to say that while these skills may or may not be real, Escaflowne is kind of nebulous on whether or not fortune-telling is legit in-universe, that they shouldn't necessarily be relied upon, because at the end of the day, people should make their own fates with their own hands, with their own agency, doing what they think is right. The series does go about this a little oddly, because instead of simply establishing that false prophecies are bad, or establishing that people can kind of psych themselves into doing certain things, Vaughn's mother, for some reason, shows up and tells Hitomi that, hey, your fortune telling is literally creating bad outcomes by literally forcing the future into a certain way. Now, this is a very odd statement because this show is pretty subtle with the theme of making one's own destiny for most of the time, So I found it really odd that there is a scene where the character literally says, hey, this is your fault. I also didn't like the fact that it implied that all the bad stuff that's happened is a result of Hitomi's fortune telling. I understand that they're saying that you shouldn't turn to superstition or something when you're scared, because that can cause you to act irrationally, and that could cause you to act out of fear and make poor decisions. I understand that that's the point they're trying to get across. However, instead of saying, hey, you're acting irrationally and that's affecting your judgment, they say, hey, you're literally manipulating fate, which is a bit on the nose for me. Again, this is going back to that scene with Vaughn's mother that I didn't particularly care for, although I do see what they're doing. I do see what the series is saying, and it's saying that you have to exercise your own power and control your own fate. And this is what Hitomi does, and she's a great character for doing it, as she's realistic and not necessarily a pushover, but still a decent person who listens to her moral compass and tries to be friendly, or at least nice, decent to those around her. The fact that she walks this line so well is a testament to the writing of the series, and it does a good job establishing her as a relatable protagonist who, while not super involved in a lot of the action scenes, is still quite impactful. If Hitomi was too nice, or unrealistically forgiving, or positive, or something like that, it'd be kind of hard to relate to her, because she does see some not very good things in the series. If this was the case, we could easily dismiss her as an unrelatable cardboard cutout of a saint. If she went in the complete opposite direction, say she was all about her agency, and ended up discarding her moral compass in the process to use it as efficiently as possible, she would also be less relatable, and perhaps not even a good protagonist by that point. She's neither a cardboard cutout of a saint, though, or a Sigma, as she's never afraid to express herself, although she never gets carried away with it. She knows who she is and how she feels, and she tells others, but it doesn't affect her judgment to any point of irrationality. She's very human, and therefore very relatable. But she doesn't become irrational or impulsive to the point where she's less likable. As a young person simply trying to navigate life and figure it out what it is that she truly wants, which is something I'm sure we will all have to do or have already done, Hitomi serves as a good example of self-discovery. Part of this self-discovery, of course, is her abandoning of fortune-telling and instead relying on herself to make her own identity. While Escaflowne, again, never really establishes how legit fortune-telling is in universe, it does blatantly establish the notion that we need to make our own fates, and that if we do not, we essentially resign ourselves to an unhappy one or a less than optimal one. Hitomi proves this multiple times, whether she's using her visions to take action and avert a foreseen disaster, or even when she bails from Allen's odd grasp. In fact, she's very proactive even if she never really fights. If she sees an outcome that she doesn't like, she goes out of her way to try and change it, to try and make her own fate. She goes on to prove that yes, fate would have been made had she not done anything, but by doing something, she can mold it into a better fate. Through her, we see the need and effectiveness of exercising our own abilities and talents, as opposed to simply letting stuff happen. And I would say that this is how she truly opens the eyes of the viewers, and really cements her role as the Vision of Escaflowne. Now, Escaflowne, of course, is the mech of the series, which explains why it's in the title, but the word Vision may seem a little out of place. Hitomi, however, is the Vision. The true Vision named in the series is not the mere sight of the mech, or the literal sight of the unseen which Hitomi's abilities provide, but instead the vision in the one's own heart, the ability to look within and passionately strive for a better future instead of simply letting one happen. And this is exactly what Hitomi teaches us. She knows that she's not the most physically powerful, however she knows that she still can affect the world around her, and that she can make a contribution to help those around her, that she can make a positive contribution to society regardless of what she does on the battlefield. And it is this contribution which positively affects both herself and those around her, that positively make her own fate and mold the outcomes of her interactions with the world for the best possible outcome. Hitomi isn't just some princess waiting to be rescued, and isn't just some bystander who watches the fate of the kingdom unfold before her. Instead, she's an active participant who takes part in the process of deciding the fate of both herself and her friends and her loved ones and the kingdom. She is the vision of someone who has learned to use their own agency and attachments and bonds and passions to shape their own future, instead of letting fate dictate it to them.